Hi there BookTube, and welcome to a new video. This is my Friday Read stroke weekly wrap-up video, and it's all about the Reading Women Readathon for June that was started by Kendra Winchester. And I've read 5 books on the bingo card, and I'll go through that towards the end of the video, but I'll talk about the books first. So the first book I read is Lullaby by Lelia Slimani, which was my book by a Muslim author, and I read this in one day on June the 1st, I think. It's a very solid, 4-star read for me, slightly sort of unspectacular really. I think the issue I had with it was I didn't believe all the modulations of sort of mood and attitude of the characters to each other. So that, basically this professional French couple, she's a lawyer, he's a music producer, they hire a nanny to their 2 young children. The book opens with the scene of carnage because the nanny has killed those 2 children, and the rest of the book is told in sort of flashback as to how we arrive at that point. And initially the nanny is sort of perfect, that the kids love her, respond to her brilliantly, and without being asked she sort of restores order to the chaos of their house. She does the sort of the housework, the cleaning, she has meals ready on the table for when the parents return. And initially she's perfect, they love her. And then there's just 1 or 2 signs in some of her actions that cause them to stop up short. And I thought this was the interesting part of the book, where the parents know how dependent on her they are. That if they got rid of her, that the order of their household would collapse. It's a book about class. It's a book about loneliness in relation to the nanny. That on one level she almost wants to become part of their family because she has nothing in her life. Her husband died, she lives in a shithole, and she does genuinely love the kids. But as I say, she does have her little moments of rebellion, and there are times, at those points the parents consider, that they, maybe they ought to get rid of her, but they feel they can't because it's not quite a big enough act of rebellion to dismiss her, given all the good things that were down to them for having her as a nanny. And those are the moments that I struggled with psychologically, because as much as I enjoyed how it had been established how dependent they were on her, I couldn't quite understand her little acts of rebellion, because it didn't quite, on the one hand, they're supposed to be red flags to where we end up, where she kills the children. But I didn't feel that psychological movement, that psychological journey to the end point was modulated correctly. But as I say, solid 4-star read, an easy read. I read it in one day, which I don't tend not to do very often with books. But it's sort of slightly unspectacular, really. There were occasional bits of good writing. Bear in mind this is in translation from the French. So here's a point where she's in the park with other nannies minding the children. Everyone knows that some mothers, the most sensible and conscientious ones, come here nanny shopping, the way people used to go down to the docks or to the end of an alley to find a maid or a warehouseman. The mothers prowl around the benches, observing the nannies, examining the faces of the children when they go running to the thighs of these women who brusquely blow their nose or console them after a fall. Sometimes the mothers ask questions, they investigate. I just really like the image there of comparing a sort of, the dock workers, the stevedores used to sort of queue up for, to get the job each day, to be chosen from, the crowd, and it's similar to the nannies. I thought that was a really nice image. So 4 out of 5. And on to Temi O, Do You Dream of Terra 2, which is science fiction, and I wanted to sort of, wedge this into my reading because I fancied reading it, and this is a good opportunity to do it in this month. I wasn't sure which of the categories it was, so I've gone for beautiful cover. I don't necessarily believe it is a beautiful cover, but it is a striking image of a female astronaut of colour, and Temi O obviously herself is a woman of colour author. And I've just finished this today, Friday, and it's a really interesting book. It's a science fiction book that's, I don't know the science, but I assume is rigorously researched in terms of the effects of travelling in space. But it's not really a science fiction. Its concern isn't really with the science fiction. Its concern is with, it's a character-led science fiction. So the UK is launching a mission to a newly discovered planet called Terra 2, which is 23 years away to travel. And the UK is ahead of the field in this, in travelling so far, because it has a scientist who's developed a way of sort of gravity acceleration, whereby they'll use the rings of Saturn almost like a slingshot to sort of whip round and accelerate them out of our solar system towards Terra 2. Terra 2 is important because it's discovered to have a very similar, you know, sort of ecology and atmosphere and everything to Earth, but no one lives there. There's animal and flora life, but there's no human, so they're going to colonise it. And the UK, because they have this technological advantage, are looking to colonise it first. So they have this sort of space school where they take, you know, all these sort of gifted children from the age of 12 and 13, train them up for 5-6 years, gradually culling them in terms of, you know, the most fit and able for the trip. So there's 6 students who basically have had no childhood because they've been hothoused from the age of 12 and 13. And here they are, sort of callow 20-year-olds, going off to start a new civilization. Now, there are some senior crew members to sort of oversee and guide them, but they are the focus of the mission because they are going to be the pioneers. You know, 23 years later, they'll be 33. My maths, 40. They'll be 43-year-olds. So, you know, they'll still be fit and able to, you know, do the necessary on this planet Terra 2. So the 6 characters are, the first one is Poppy, who comes from a very deprived background, is very beautiful, is sort of the public face of the mission, that she's responsible for all the comms, all the videos that are going to be transmitted back to Earth. Then there's Harry, who is someone from a very privileged background, has always sort of, you know, had life very easy, has won everything he's ever entered to. He's the golden boy of the space school, but he's exceedingly competitive. He doesn't want to relinquish his #1 spot. And in that there are elements of sociopathy about him, I think. Then there is twins, Astrid and Juno. Now Astrid is a dreamer. She has dreamt of Terra 2, and she has these visions of what it's like, and they are scarily accurate. And she's an interesting character, but actually she hovers in the background more than any of the others. We see her the least, really. And her twin sister Juno is not a dreamer at all. She is practical, pragmatic, and she has a sense of what you need to do to preserve order, because there are times on the ship where, you know, order threatens to break down, and obviously, you know, they have to cooperate with each other, they have to work with each other in order to survive such a journey. So that's 4 of the crew. The 5th is Elliot, who's the youngest of them all. He's a year younger than the rest of them, and he's probably somewhere on the Asperger's autism scale. He was a genius at 12, 13, inventing quite difficult scientific sort of based technology or scientific solutions to problems, practical problems. But he's very socially awkward, and his best friend is called Ara, and the catalyst that kicks all this off and remains in the background throughout the book is that Ara, on the day before they're due to launch, commits suicide. She throws herself into the River Thames and drowns. And of course, Elliot's particularly badly affected because she was like the only person who got him. But they're all affected because they don't have, it's a shock. No one saw it coming. They don't have time to grieve for her. They aren't even able to attend her funeral because they're shot off into space. And the last character is called Jessie, who is the person called off the substitutes bench to replace Ara to fulfil the functions she had on the ship, which is to do with sort of growing plants and growing food and stuff. So those are the 6 characters, plus the more senior astronauts. And the book is about their interactions. And as I say, there's moments where it, threatens to sort of, collapse because they are very young. They've been removed from reality in this school for 6 years. And they're shot into space with this sort of huge responsibility. But more than that, it's the sort of the sensory deprivation of space, this sort of eternal blackness. The eternal loneliness, the artificial environment you have on the spaceship, all these sorts of things. And I think that's where the book's really interesting, in that it's a sort of a study of those characters who, like Astrid, who dreams of going to a new place, a really positive, magnetic draw to her. and those characters who are running from something on Earth or want to leave something on Earth. And the shadow amongst all of it is this unfinished business with Ara, the person who committed suicide. So I think it's a really good, you know, it is science fiction, but that's not really the focus of the book. You know, it is interesting to study their interactions and their failures and their foibles because they're so young and they're so callow. But that's also the reason I gave this 4 stars rather than 5, because they're clearly immature, sheltered children, sheltered from the harsh realities of the world, so that their psychology is quite stunted, really. And so it was slightly unsatisfying in that respect, I suppose. That as interesting as their interactions were, I felt that they were limited. You knew the parameters and the limitations of how they could interact and how they could respond. But the last 30, 40 pages is really strong, because it starts, you know, it's called Do You Dream of Terra too, and it starts being more philosophical, questions of faith and belief and what symbols, you know, mean for us. And it returns to that question of, well, are you fleeing something from Earth, or are you actively magnetically drawn to something positive, drawing you to Terra too? And I thought that was fabulous. It's an odd book in that respect, that the ending's actually better than the rest of the book, which is normally not what you have. Normally you have these sort of great reads that just completely disappoint you at the end. This is opposite. I thought the ending was the strongest. On to When Rap Spoke to God, a poem by Erica Dawson. Now I've chose this instead of short stories because I'm completely off short stories, so I cheated. I've substituted poetry for that. And I think it's worth, you know, last year I read Traneka Hodge, and this year it's Erica Dawson, who are, you know, women of colour, sort of responding to the sexism of the rap industry, where so many songs in rap and hip hop are about, you know, women gold diggers who are after the money of these, you know, hip hop singers and all of that. And I think both Hodge and Dawson, I mean, Hodge certainly hung out with rap stars. She was part of that scene. Dawson, I don't know what her backstory is. But these books seem to me to be saying, well, we're women of colour, you know, we're not gold diggers, we're artists in our own right, we're poets in our own right, we are equals of you hip-hop artists. You know, read our art. And I think that's really important, you know, to make that sort of space to counter, you know, what that's a prevailing dominance of, you know, a certain section of rap lyrics are. As to the poem itself, well, I didn't always get what it was, you know, kind of where it was coming from. There are bits that you just get swept away in the beautiful language and the poetry and the lyricism. And then there are other bits where they're sort of holding patterns, or they were to me, because I didn't quite figure what was going on. So in a way I thought the parts are greater than the whole, but I'll go and reread it at some point and see if it coheres better together. So I gave it 4 stars. So just to give you an example of the poetry. I too can come and go from this. I'll leave you in Gethsemane's Xistus, the beck and call of the cock, and falling wind that always ends on hush. Go on, do it. Deny me, Peter. I'm a Meniad shape-shifting inside a sheltered cave. And when the grave sky's body farm of gods and gutted animals serves me, you'll eat me, masticate me with your tongue, my mouth a bit of gristle. When I asked for grace, the dust hid all the stars, and not a single thing happened. But now I am the dust, the rivers choke on my fine silt, the loathes is my body, all the fertile air, the firmament of my thick skin, and then the Holy Spirit finds its voice. So I did think there was some tremendous writing in here, and I do look forward to going back and reading that. So the next book I read, I don't have because I read it on the Kindle application on my laptop, and that is Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, which fulfills the mental health square on the bingo card. And I downloaded it last year or the year before because it was free to download on Amazon Kindle, but I haven't got round to reading it. So this is the perfect opportunity. It's only 26 pages long. It's not, you know, it's not a very long read, but it was superb. I mean, it was 5 stars. Written around the late 19th century. It's about a woman and her husband who ostensibly have left their sort of townhouse because it's being redecorated or repaired or something, and they rent this sort of sprawling mansion in the countryside, and downstairs is all beautiful rooms and everything. But upstairs, in what used to be a child's nursery, that's where they're sleeping. And all there is in that room is a bed, which needs to be sort of nailed to the floor. And the other thing that room has is this sort of yellow wallpaper that begins to sort of prey on the woman's sort of psyche. And she is there, you know, the excuse is they've gone there because their house is being redecorated, but actually she's there because of her nerves, you know, it's a rest cure for her nerves, or what we would call today depression. Hence the mental health element of this book. And I don't want to give too much away, it is only 26 pages, so I cannot talk at length in this, but basically the first thing about the wallpaper is it doesn't have a pattern, and I love that concept because I'm very hostile to pattern, because I think patterns, because we are sort of mentally wired to recognise patterns, I think that reduces our thinking. So I write quite a lot about sort of trying to think out of the box and trying not to get suckered into sort of pattern recognition. So the first thing is that the wallpaper doesn't need to have an appreciable pattern, and you know, in a way I would like more on that, but I appreciate this is a short story. So that was right in my wheelhouse. And then gradually she imagines that she can actually see the outline of a female figure trapped in this wallpaper. And again, I can't say too much about it without sort of spoilers, but you know, it becomes about the relationship of her to this image of the trapped woman. And you realise that, you know, the issue is not her nerves, or she has an issue with her nerves. The problem is her husband, it's her marriage, it's the gender prescriptions, the prescriptions on gender roles in marriage and for women generally. And it's just a superb little punchy short story. The ending is fabulous, and that's all I can say about it. I mean, I just really, really enjoyed it. And the fifth square I finished. I'm not going to talk about this today, but it's The Condition of Secrecy by Christiansen, a Danish essayist and poet. So this fulfills the essays bingo card. And I'm not going to talk about it because I've got two other non-fiction books that one I'm currently reading, not by a woman. The other I finished just before June started, just before the Reading Women started. So I'm going to talk about those three books together once I finish the one I'm currently reading. But this is again a really good, solid book. 4 out of 5 stars. Like any collection of essays, some essays are more interesting and more relevant than others. So there you have it. That's my first week of the Reading Women readathon. I've sort of done 5 bingo squares. Here is the bingo square, and I've expanded from my original TBR video because I've added AM Homes to the LGBTQT square. I don't know if the book I've got, which is hang on a second, which is this one, This Book Will Change Your Life. I don't know if this is specifically an LGBTQ theme, but AM Holmes is a lesbian. I've also added an Asian writer, Dear Friend from My Life, I Write to You in Your Life by Yi-Yun Lee. I've also got another Yi-Yun Lee. This is non-fiction. I've got a Yi-Yun Lee novel coming, hasn't arrived yet, so sometime in June I decide which one I'm going to read. It'll either be this or the other one. So, you know, I've now covered a lot more of the squares, but still frustratingly, as you'll see, I don't have a complete line to shout bingo house, and I won't, because the white squares will remain white and unfilled, because these are not things that I have any interest in reading, not because they're by women, but, you know, I have no interest in reading kiddie lit, YA, memoir. What else is there that I can't remember, because I don't have it in front of me, stupidly. So I'm responding to something that's up in the screen, but I can't see it myself. So I don't think I'm going to be able to complete a line, but there you go. So till next time, thanks very much.